Well, let me tell you what I hope is going to happen as a result of the session I'm going to do tonight and the session I'm going to do tomorrow. My first desire is if you are married, your marriage will get better. Would that be all right with you? Yes. Marriages either get better or they get worse. They never stand still. And I certainly hope your marriage won't get worse because I came. I hope it'll get better. And if you're single, I hope that all of your relationships will get better. Because we're going to talk about two really, really important things when it comes to human relationships. So that's what I hope is going to happen. Tonight I want to talk about what I believe to be the most important word in the English language and the most confusing word in the English language. I say that love is the most important word because if you examine our literature, our music, our theater, our religions, you'll find that love is a central theme in all of them. But I say that love is the most confusing word because we use the word love in 1,000 ways. We say, for example, I love hot dogs. Or in North Carolina where I live, we say, I love barbecue. And then I hear people say, oh man, I love the mountains. I love the beach. I love my new car. I love my dog. And then we say to a special someone, I love you. What is that supposed to mean? Hot dogs, barbecue, dogs, and you. I'm not going to talk about 1,000 ways that we use the word love. I'm going to talk only about 3 ways that we use the word love. And I'm going to focus on the third of these. I want to begin with what we typically call falling in love. I doubt that you've ever heard a lecture on falling in love. But I want to say a few words about it because I think it's to some degree misunderstood by lots of people. And I'm not opposed to this kind of thing. It's absolutely incredibly wonderful. But I think it's often misunderstood. This kind of love begins with a feeling. You meet the person, there's something about the way they look, the way they talk, the way they emote that just gives you a warm, bubbly feeling. And you want to see them again. And every time you get together, it gets stronger and stronger. And eventually, it becomes an emotional obsession. You can't get them off your mind when you're really in love. I mean, you go to bed thinking about them, wake up thinking about them, all day long you think about them. I mean, they're the most wonderful person you've ever met in your life. Now, your mother can see their flaws, but you can't. I mean, your mother will say, well, now, honey, have you considered that they haven't had a steady job in 5 years? And you will say, oh, Mama, they're just waiting for the right opportunity. You see, we literally obsessed with them. I mean, honestly, they're the most wonderful person you've ever met, and you don't see any flaws in them. It's incredibly wonderful. But you know what, I was always told that if you got the real, I went to my mother and I said, Mom, how do you know when you're really in love? And my mother said what many mothers have said. She said, son, if it's real, you'll know it. I like my mother. That didn't help me at all. And the fact is, we don't help young people very much. But what they said to me was, if you got the real thing, it's going to last forever. And we know now that's not true. We've studied it. Dorothy Tenney, Bridgeport, Connecticut, long-term study on the in-love experience. You know what she found out? The average lifespan of that obsession is 2 years. Some a little longer, some a little less, average 2 years, and we come down off the high. I wish I'd known that because that really blew me away. Because my wife and I had dated 2 years before we got married. I came down pretty soon after the honeymoon. And everything my mother had told me about her was true. And I'm sure what her mother told her about me was true. And then we realized we disagreed on a bunch of stuff. And when you're in love, you don't have many disagreements. I mean, whatever you want, babe's fine with me, you know. And we didn't know how to solve conflicts, so we ended up arguing with each other. And I knew I was right, and she knew she was right. And I tried to convince her, and she tried to convince me. I remember one night, it was pouring down rain outside, and we got into an argument, And in the middle of the argument, while my wife walked out the front door into the rain, and I thought, this is bad. If a woman walks in the rain, it's bad. I just wish they had told me that you will come down off the high, that this emotional high is not something that stays with you forever. We come down off that high. And I also wish they'd told me that every couple will have conflicts, because no two humans are going to agree on everything. And we're going to have different ideas, we're going to have different emotions. And I wish I had learned some things about how to solve conflicts without arguing with each other. That's why when I wrote a book some time ago called Things I Wish I'd Known Before We Got Married, one of them is I wish I'd known how to solve conflicts without arguing. And I also wish I'd known that there's two stages of romantic love. And all I knew is I lost it. I had it and I lost it, and it's gone. And then not only did I not have positive feelings toward her, now I had negative feelings toward her. And I think the fact that my wife and I went through so many problems trying to work all this out is the reason why I've invested a large portion of my life trying to help other couples. Because I know what it feels like to be married and to feel like I married the wrong person, it's not going to work, we're too different, and I've lost the love feelings, and I empathize with people when they sit in my office and say we have no hope for our relationship. And many times I've said through the years, I'm with you. I can see how you feel that way. Would you be willing to go on my hope? Because I have hope for you. And if you're willing to go on my hope, and you'll try some things with me here, we can just see what happens. And so when couples don't even have hope, if they're willing to go on somebody else's hope and try some things differently and understand things differently, they can go on to have a good marriage after they've come down off that high and after they've gone through some of the things my wife and I went through. So I just wish I'd had a little more understanding about the in love thing. So I just throw that out to you for what it's worth, whether you're married or whether you're single, whether you've been in love 3 times or whether you've got 5 wives or whether you got. So anyway, the second way we use the word love that I want to talk about just briefly is not nearly as exciting, but it's love as an attitude. That doesn't do much for you, does it? Love as an attitude. The attitude of love. An attitude is a fixed way of thinking. And the attitude of love is, I choose to look out for your interest. I choose to do whatever I can to enrich your life. I choose to help you become the person you believe you want to become. Now here's the good news. We choose our attitudes. We don't choose to fall in love. You don't get up one day and say, if you're single, and say, today I'm going to go fall in love with somebody. No. It just happens, sometimes in the strangest of ways, in which you meet this person and you're attracted immediately and you want to be with them again. And it just happens. You didn't choose that. It happened. But our attitudes, we choose every single day. And this applies not only in a marriage and not only in friendships. This applies in every area of life. In fact, every individual either leans toward having an attitude of love in all areas of life, or they lean toward having an attitude of selfishness, which is the opposite of love. And this is true in the business world. There are people in the business world who have an attitude of love. Many of you have an attitude of love. That is, in your business, you want to enrich the lives of people by what you're selling or the product or whatever it is. You want to enrich the lives of people. Certainly you plan to make money. We all have to have some money to live. But the heart of what you're doing is you want to enrich the lives of people. But there are other business people who have an attitude of selfishness. And they're in the business for themselves. They want to make things for themselves. A number of years ago, some of you know, I took the Love Languages to work. Wrote a book called The 5 Languages of Appreciation in the Workplace. Wrote it with Dr. Paul White, a psychologist who had 20 years experience in business before we wrote the book. And he said to me, Gary, we need to take the love languages to work. And he gave me 2 research projects that convinced me. One is that 70% of the people who have a job in this country say they feel little to no appreciation from the people with whom they work. 64% of the people who leave a job and go to another job say they left primarily because they didn't feel appreciated where they were. And so I said, well, the need is there. We did 2 years of research to make sure this had an impact in the business place. But in that process, I was talking with a man who owned a construction company, and I was sharing this concept with him and how it would enhance the lives of his workers and be more productive work climate and so forth. And he said to me, I don't care whether my men feel appreciated or not. I have a job for them to do. I pay them well. They do the job fine. They don't do the job, I fire them. I don't care how they feel, whether they feel appreciated or not. A selfish attitude. I'm in this business to make money. I don't care how people feel who work for me. So people either have an attitude of love or they have an attitude of selfishness. And that's true of every single one of us. And it's true on a regular daily basis. And we can kind of fluctuate. And all of us have a concern for self. Nothing wrong with that. I mean, we have to take care of ourselves and we have to, enrich our lives. But it makes a huge difference. And not only in marriage, not only in close relationships, but in everything. A huge difference as to what attitude we have in life. The third way I want to use the word is the word I want to focus on tonight, and that is love as an emotional need. Almost everyone agrees that one of our deepest emotional needs as humans is the need to feel loved by the significant people in our lives. I like to picture inside every child, there's what I call an emotional love tank. And if that love tank is full, that is, the child genuinely feels loved by the parents, the child tends to grow up emotionally healthy. But if that love tank is empty, and that child does not feel loved by the parents, they tend to grow up with many internal emotional struggles. And in the teenage years, they will likely go looking for love, often in the wrong places. But I believe that adults also have an emotional love tank. If you're married, the person you would most like to love you is your spouse. In fact, if you feel loved by your spouse, life is beautiful. But if the love tank is empty and you feel like they don't love me, they wish they weren't married to me, life begins to look pretty dark. And so, just as much of the misbehavior of children grows out of an empty love tank, much of the misbehavior of adults grows out of an empty love tank. So the question is, how do you keep the love tank full after you come down off the high of the in-love experience? And the difficulty in doing this is we have assumed that what makes one person feel loved will make another person feel loved. And that's a false assumption. Never forget the day I first encountered this in my office many years ago. A couple came in, I'd never met them, found out they'd been married to each other for 30 years. They sat down and the wife started talking immediately. She said, Dr. Chapman, before we start, let me just tell you a little bit about us. She said, we don't argue. We don't believe in arguing. We don't have any money problems. She said, I was reading an article that said money's the biggest problem in marriage. She said, not for us. And she went on with 2 or 3 more positive things. And I was beginning to wonder, did they come in to tell me what a good marriage they had? But then she started crying. And she said, but the problem is, I just don't feel any love coming from him. We're like roommates living in the same house. He does his thing, I do my thing. We're cordial, but there's nothing going on between us. And I just feel empty inside. And I don't know how long I can go on like this. I looked at her husband, and he said, I don't understand her. I do everything I can to show her that I love her. And she sits there and tells you what she's been telling me. She doesn't feel loved. He said, I don't know what else I could do. I said, well, what do you do to show your love to her? He said, well, I get home from work before she does. I start the evening meal. Sometimes I have it ready when she gets home. If not, she'll help me. After we eat, I wash the dishes every night. On Thursdays, I vacuum the floor. On Saturday, I wash the car. I mow the grass. I help her with the laundry. And he went on, and I was beginning to wonder, what does this woman do? It sounded to me like he was doing everything. He said, I do all of that. And she says she doesn't feel loved. He said, I don't know what else I can do. I looked back at her, and she started crying again. And she said, he's right. He's a hard-working man. She said, but we don't ever talk. We haven't talked in 20 years. He's always mowing the grass, washing the dishes, vacuuming the floors. You understand what's going on? A sincere husband who was doing everything he knew to do to show his wife that he loves her, and a wife who didn't get it. And after that, I heard similar stories over and over in my office. And I knew there had to be a pattern to what I was hearing, but I had no idea what it was. But eventually, I took time to sit down and read several years of notes that I made when I was counseling, and asked myself the question, when someone said, I feel like my spouse doesn't love me, what did they want? What were they complaining about? And their answers fell into 5 categories. And I later called them the 5 love languages. And I started using it in my counseling. If you want her to feel love, you've got to learn how to express love in her love language. If you want him to feel love, you've got to learn to express love in his love language. And I would help couples discover each other's language, challenge them to go home and try it, and sometimes they would come back the very next session and say, Gary, this is beginning to change things. This is things are getting to be different here. And then I start teaching the concept to groups like this. And the same thing would happen. Probably 5 years later, I thought, if I could put this concept in a book and write it in the language of the common person, leave out psychological terms that many people would not understand, maybe I could help a lot of people that I would never have time to see in my office. Little did I know, of course, that the book would sell now, as I said, over 20 million copies, and be published in over 60 languages around the world, which absolutely blew my mind. Because before I studied counseling, I did an undergrad and a master's in cultural anthropology, studying cultures all over the world and how they're organized. So I was very sensitive to cultural differences. In fact, when the first publisher came, which was Spanish, and asked to publish permission to publish it, I said to my publisher, I don't know if this works in Spanish. I discovered this in Middle America. I don't know if this works in other cultures. And they said, well, they've read the book and they want to publish it. I said, okay. It became their bestseller. And then it went on and on and on all over the world. So I was not dogmatic to say there's only 5 love languages. But since then, people have given me additional ideas, but every idea they've shared fits as a dialect within one of these 5. So I'm going to share them with you. Many of you have heard it, but if you've heard it before, it'll be a review, getting on the front burner. And I discovered also this works not only in a marriage, it works in all close human relationships, whether it's dating relationships or whether it's parent-child relationships or whether it's work relationships. So here are the 5 fundamental 5 love languages. Number 1 is words of affirmation. Words of affirmation. Using words to affirm the other person. You look nice in that outfit. I really appreciate what you did. You know, one of the things I like about you is just looking for things that you can affirm about the other person. Now, I did have a lady say to me some time ago, she said, Gary, I know it would be good if I could give my husband some positive words, but to be honest with you, I can't think of anything good to say about the man. And I said, well, does he ever take a shower? She said, well, yes. I said, well, how often? She said, well, every day. I said, if I were you, I'd start there. I said, there are men who don't. I've never met a man, a woman, boy, or girl that you couldn't find something good to say about them. And for some people, this is their love language. Now, you give these people critical words, harsh words, yelling and screaming at them, it's like a dagger in their heart. You're killing them. You know, there's an ancient Hebrew proverb that says life and death is in the power of the tongue. We can kill people by the way we talk to them, or we can give them life by the way we talk to them. So words of affirmation, and they can focus on anything. They can focus on the way they look, on something they are doing, you know, to a child. You say, you know, show me your muscle again. Man, that's good. I like that. Anything, just looking for anything that you can affirm people about. So words of affirmation. Number 2 is gifts. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. I mentioned my background in cultural anthropology. We have never discovered a culture where gift giving is not an expression of love. It's universal to give gifts as an expression of love. The gifts don't have to be expensive. Haven't we always said it's the thought that counts? But I remind you, it's not the thought left in your head that counts. It's the gift that came out of the thought in your head, okay? You know, I've sometimes said to guys, I said, listen, guys, you can get free flowers in the spring and summer, in most places. Just do what your kids do. Go out in your backyard and pick one. How many mothers here have ever received a dandelion from your kids? Yeah. They see it, they're fascinated. Give it to mama. I said, if you don't have any flowers in your backyard, check out your neighbor's yard. And I don't mean steal them. I mean just say to your neighbor, you know, my wife likes those kind of flowers. Could I give you $5 for that flower? I'll almost guarantee you. Your neighbor says, oh man, take the flower. I don't want your money. Or you could go to a funeral. I did that not long ago. I was out at the cemetery. Service was over. Family was leaving. There was flowers on the casket. Not exactly what you're thinking. Some of the family members were pulling out a rose as they walked out, and one of them said to me, Dr. Chapman, would you like to have a rose? I said, I certainly would, thank you. Took that thing home, gave it to my wife. I told her where I got it. She still liked it. You can pick up a stone in a city parking lot and give it to an 8-year-old boy. Hey man, I found this today and I thought about you. Look at the colors in this stone, man. I want you to have it. If gifts is his language, you'll find that stone in his dresser drawer when he's 23, and he'll remember the day you gave it to him. For some people, gifts is their love language. Number 3 is acts of service. Acts of service. Doing something to show your love for them. This is the language, the gentleman I illustrated, this is the language he was speaking. He was doing all these things for his wife, acts of service. So in a marriage, it is such things as cooking meals. In fact, cooking a meal is a huge act of service. Anybody here still cook? Yeah, some of you, yeah. My son didn't get married till he was 34. People kept asking him, when are you going to get married? When are you going to get married? He would say, when you grow up in the home of a marriage counselor, you're very careful. But eventually he got married and he came home. He said, Dad, I got a bonus when I married Amy. I said, really? He said, yeah, Dad, she likes to cook. I never thought I'd find a girl in my generation that likes to cook. Then my daughter married a man that likes to cook. My kids got it made on the cooking deal. Washing dishes is an act of service. Who does that at your house? Yeah, that's what I do. I can't cook. I can't cook a lick. But I wash dishes every night. My wife cooks. On the nights that we don't go out, she cooks. And I wash the dishes. Yeah, so acts of service, washing dishes, vacuuming floors, washing the car, or running the car through a car wash, or walking the dog, or changing the baby's diaper, or anything that you know they would like for you to do. And you don't have to worry about it. If this is their language, they'll tell you what they'd like for you to do. Okay? Acts of service. Remember the old saying, actions speak louder than words. That's true if this is their love language. It's not true for everyone. But if this is their love language, actions will speak louder than words. Number 4 is quality time. Quality time. Giving the other person your undivided attention. I do not mean for a married couple sitting there watching TV together. Someone else has your attention. I'm talking about TV is off. Computer is down. We're not answering our phone. We're giving each other our full attention, interfacing with each other. Or we can be taking a walk together, in which we have each other's attention. And sometimes it's not talking. Sometimes it's doing something with the other person that they want you to do, but like starting a little flower garden in the front yard, and they want it, and they want you to help them do it. And so it's an act of service and quality time, because you're giving your full attention to them while you're doing this project together. So quality time. For some people, this is their primary language. Number 5 is physical touch. Affirming physical touch. We've long known the emotional power of physical touch. That's why we pick up babies, hold them and kiss them and cuddle them. And long before the baby understands the meaning of the word love, the baby feels love by physical touch. So in a marriage, this is such things as holding hands, arm around the shoulder. Driving down the road, you put your hand on their leg. You walk by them. They walk by you at home, and you trip them. I'm kidding. Don't trip your spouse. And the whole sexual part of marriage is a dialect of this particular language. All of these languages have dialects. That is, numerous ways to express these languages, okay? Now, what I want to suggest is that each of us has a primary love language. Married or single, young or old, each of us has a primary love language. One of these 5 speaks more deeply to us emotionally than the other 4. Now, we're not going to turn away any one of them. But if we don't receive love in our primary language, we will not feel loved, even though the person is speaking some of the other languages. This is why a husband can be sincere in expressing his love to his wife, doing all that he knows to do, and it doesn't register emotionally with her, because it's not her primary love language. Now, in a marriage, almost never does a husband and wife have the same love language. It does happen, but not very often. And even if it happens, if they have the same primary language, they will likely have different dialects of that language. For example, a wife said, Dr. Chapman, my husband and I have the same love language. I said, wonderful. What is it? She said, acts of service. But, she said, the things I want him to do for me around the house that make me feel loved are different from the things he wants me to do to make him feel loved. Same language, just different dialects. Now, let me throw this out. Because a lot of men will hear what I've said so far, and in their minds, they're saying to themselves, I know my love language. Physical touch. Physical touch. Physical touch. And they're thinking about the sexual part of marriage. And I say to them, when a guy tells me that, I say, well, maybe that is your love language, but let me ask you a question. Do non-sexual touches make you feel loved? And first of all, they look at me like a deer in the headlights. Are there non-sexual touches? I said, well, let's say, for example, the two of you get out of the car, you're walking into a shopping mall, and your wife reaches over and holds your hand as you walk into the mall. Does that make you feel loved? And if he says, no, that kind of irritates me. I said, okay, let's say that you're driving down the road and your wife just reaches over and puts her hand on your leg. Does that make you feel loved? He said, not really. I said, physical touch is not your love language. You like sex, I get that deal. No question about that. It's another whole thing. But don't assume that all men have physical touch as their primary language, because that's not true, okay? Now, by nature, we speak our own language. If we don't know anything about the love language concept, we will tend to express our love to our spouse in what we perceive to be love. That's precisely what I did when we first got married. Before I came down off the high, the first few months of our marriage, when I still was up on the high, I gave my wife words of affirmation. I wouldn't have called it that, but because I didn't have the concept of love language. But I told her how nice she looked, how much I appreciated what she did. I probably told her a dozen times a day, I love you, honey. I am so glad I married you. I love you, love you, love you. And one night she said to me, you keep on saying I love you. If you love me, why don't you help me? And I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you don't ever offer to wash the dishes or vacuum the floor or clean the toilet. I mean, you don't offer to do anything. I didn't say this, but what I was thinking, what are you talking about? My mama did those things. Whoa! We bring our history with us. If mama did it, we expect her to do it. And I like to say to guys, you're not married to your mama. And you gals are not married to your daddy. Don't expect your husband to do all the stuff your daddy did, okay? But what I say, looking back on it, I was loving her. I was expressing love to her with words. But her language was was acts of service, you see? So, by nature, we speak our own language. And so obviously the answer is we have to learn to speak the other person's language. Now, let me underline the word learn. Because if the primary love language of the other person is something that doesn't come natural for you, there'll be a learning curve. I remember the husband who said to me, he said, Gary, my wife and I read the book and we took the quiz, and her language is words of affirmation. And he said, I don't know how to do that. He said, I never received positive words growing up. He said, all I remember, my parents, both of them, would tell me periodically that I was lazy and I was never going to amount to anything. And I don't know how to say positive words. And I said to him, well, you are where you are. Folks, we can't change our history. I said, but here's the good news. You can learn to speak this language as an adult, even if you didn't receive it as a child. I said, for example, can you tell me 3 things that your wife is good at? He said, well, she's a good mother. She's a good cook. And she's a good school teacher. I wrote those 3 things down. And out beside of them, I wrote 2 or 3 sentences. Like on the cooking was something like, honey, I haven't told you this, but I really appreciate all the meals you cook. You're a wonderful cook. Just 2 or 3 sentences out by each one of them. I said, now here's your assignment. This week, twice a day, I want you to get in a room by yourself and read these sentences out loud so you hear yourself actually reading these sentences. And by the end of the week, when you come back to see me next week, I hope you can say them to me without looking at your notes. He said, well, I'll try it. So he came back the next week. And I said, well, can you say them? And he did. I said, okay, here's your assignment. The next 3 weeks, I want you to give her one of these each week. I don't care what day of the week, I don't care what time of day, but you give her one of these compliments this week, and then another one the next week, and another one the next week. He said, oh man, I hope I can do this. I said, you just did it to me. If you can say them to me, you can say them to her. And I said, you don't have to look into her face. I know that's frightening to look into her face and say these words. I said, she can be looking the other way. You just walk up behind her and say them, Trying to make it as easy as I could for him. Well, he came back and he had done it. I said, how'd your wife respond? He said, well, on the third week, she said to me, what's going on with you? I've never heard you give me so many compliments. I said, what did you say? He said, well, I just told her, well, honey, we read that book and we took that quiz, and your language is words of affirmation, and I'm just trying to learn how to put into words how much I love you. She said, oh, that is so sweet. You see, folks, we can learn these languages. Now, this is where attitude comes in. Because I had a man say to me, Dr. Chapman, my wife and I read your book. We took the quiz. Her language is acts of service. But I'm going to tell you and her, if it's going to take my washing dishes and my vacuuming floors for her to feel loved, she can forget that. And I said to him, that's your choice. Love is a choice. If you choose to live with a wife who has an empty love tank, that's your choice. I said, I much prefer to live with a wife who has a full love tank. I said, my wife's language is acts of service. I do wash dishes. I do vacuum floors and so forth. And she tells me I'm the greatest husband in the world. I said, that's a hyperbole, but I like it. Because my language is words of affirmation. But you understand what he's saying? I'm not going to do anything I don't want to do. He's selfish. Selfish. The attitude of selfish. I'm not going to do that. So this is where, again, the realization that we choose an attitude of love. And what I'm giving is information on how to effectively meet a person's need for emotional love. I can't give you motivation. You choose to be a lover, or you choose not to be a lover. Well, how do you discover your love language? Well, most of you know that there is a quiz and at 5lovelanguages.com. My publisher told me over 140 million people have taken that quiz. And when they told me that, I said, you guys should have been charging $1 a piece. And so it's free. Now we do have a deeper quiz now. It's called the Premier Quiz, which you do have to pay for, which not only gives you the love languages and how they parallel, but discusses what your dialects are within those things, and also what your personality, how your personality affects this, which is just a deeper dive for those that are already familiar with the concept. It's a deeper dive that we just put that out recently. But let me give you 3 informal ways to discover someone else's love language or your own love language, if you have a close relationship with the person. And these are not on the screen. But number 1 is observe their behavior. Observe their behavior, or observe your behavior. Because as I said, people typically are speaking love in their own language. So if the other person is always giving people gifts, that's a clue that receiving gifts may be their primary language. It's a clue. If they're always giving people affirming words, and you hear them, that's a clue that that's their language. And the same is true for you. If you're always giving people affirming words, that's a clue that receiving words is probably your language. A second clue is this. What do you complain about most often? What do they complain about most often? The complaint reveals the language. If your spouse says, for example, I just feel like we don't ever spend any time together anymore. They're telling you quality time is their language. You go on a business trip and come home and they say, "You didn't bring me anything?" They're telling you gifts is their language. So what do they complain about? What do you complain about? The complaint reveals the love language. And then the third is this: what do they request most often? What do they request most often? And what do you request most often? Incidentally, you can discover a child's primary love language by the time they're 4 years old by observing their behavior, the first one I gave you. My son's love language is physical touch. When he was that age, when I'd come home from work, he would run to the door, grab my legs, and climb on me. He's touching me because he wants to be touched. Our daughter never did that. At that age, our daughter would say, "Daddy, come into my room, I want to show you something." She wanted quality time. She wanted my undivided attention. It's there very early in a child's life. By the time the teenage years, my daughter's most common request was, "Dad, can we take a walk after dinner?" She's asking me for quality time. My son would never walk with me. He said, "Walking is dumb. You're not going anywhere. If you're going somewhere, drive." His most common request was, "Dad, can we shoot some baskets after dinner?" And the way we shot baskets in the backyard, we'd run into each other. I'd push him, shove him. You put these three things together, whether it's a child, whether it's an adult, whether it's a marriage, whether it's some close friendship, or even work associates, okay? Now, I should throw this in terms of work, because in the work setting, the 5 languages of appreciation in the workplace, when we got to physical touch, the HR people always said, "No, no, 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 we don't touch at work. We don't touch at work. We don't touch at work." And we heard that so often that Dr. White said to me, "Gary, maybe we ought to leave it out." And I said, "Dr. White, remember, my background is anthropology. There are no human cultures where humans do not touch each other. There are affirming touches and there are abusive touches. But what we did find out in the workplace, almost no one had physical touch as their primary language in the workplace. So we ended up leaving it out of the inventory. The inventory, MBA, Motivating by Appreciation Inventory. With that book, Appreciation in the Workplace, there comes a code in every book that gives you a free online inventory. And we did leave that out there. But in the book, we do discuss physical touch in the workplace. And we talk about sexual abuse in the workplace and give some statistics on that, and also physical abuse in the workplace and how that has to be dealt with. We cannot simply allow that sort of thing to go on in the workplace. But, well, let me stop there.